Greetings. I am Dr. Daphne Davis, and Mama Noni is what everyone calls me. And I am here again with another episode and giving thanks to the Most High. I am the legacy owner of St. C Academy and African Centered School here in North Carolina. Legacy meaning that I inherited this school from my parents. William and Sylvia Davis. We've been here since 1996, and we teach students ages pre-K through 12th grade. Um, Last week, I had a conversation about my maternal side of my family. My mother is from Norfolk, Virginia, and my brothers were born there, and although we're here in Durham, my mother also, um, uh, her whole extended family is there. And so we were there to visit. And so I thought, well, gee, while I'm here, maybe I could learn some of the history of this area. It was Portsmouth, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. Let's see, Hampton, Wilmington, let's see, Newport News, and Pocosin, or Pocosin. I can't ever remember how to pronounce these, but that's an indigenous name for the area. And while we were there, we learned about the significance of Hampton Roads, and how that area participated in the Underground Railroad. It was a significant port because it's right there along the ocean. You know, you go up there, you go visit Virginia Beach. There's Ocean View. There's several. Um, well, it just borders that whole area borders the Atlantic Ocean, and so consequently, there was quite a bit of underground traffic going through there, and that was documented by William Steele. I'm gonna show you a picture real quickly of William Steele. So here he is. William Steele was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and he was born, I think he was born in what year? He was born in 1821 and transitioned in 1902. And he assisted nearly 800 people in his Underground Railroad, which was located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And he would gather these stories and from the people about their travel, how dangerous it was, what they did, and it was pretty much how they escaped, how long it took them. And he recorded, according to his text, he said the majority of these people came through the Hampton Roads area, which is where my ancestors are from. So I was, that's very exciting to know that your people participated, or people from that area were actively engaged in the Underground Railroad. And so he wrote a book, and I think, okay, so the name of the book was called The Underground Railroad, A Record of Facts, Authentic Narrative Letters, etc. And he was also a contemporary of Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. And if you saw the movie Harriet, he was one of the characters that was portrayed, who was concerned about Harriet going back and forth. But he even documented her and financed her trips back and forth south, and even when she eventually got her family and brought them up from Maryland. So he was played a significant role, William Steele, and so I would consider him an accurate, um, re a credible, witness and resource in regarding the numbers of people who were actually traveling through that area. Um, let's see. With today, I wanted to focus on North Carolina. So I'm like, if I'm going to do the maternal side of my family, I need to also maybe delve into what was going on here in North Carolina. Uh, North Carolina has a very long coast as well. And so just like Virginia, which is, adjacent to us, we also had quite a bit of traffic. But if you lived in the inner um our area of North Carolina, if you live like in Piedmont area where we are, and down in Greensboro and all those places, what did the Underground Railroad look like in those areas? And so I began my research, and so what I found was that in uh, Durham and Raleigh in our Piedmont area, a lot of times, one same as in these other areas, people would use rivers. They would find little boats. You've got the Pamlico, you've got several rivers that are Neuse River, all those places. But they said the Pamlico River in particular was used, and you got a lot of tributaries through North Carolina, but they would use these waterways, and the waterways were called Freedom Roads. I thought that was beautiful. So they would use these Freedom Roads and make their way upriver to Little Washington, and which is out in the Beaufort County area, which is down near, well, that's more like eastern North Carolina, up near the Outer Banks. And then you also have Wilmington. People would go to Wilmington, which is, about 2 hours away from here. And they would take those boats and get to those areas and then wait in those areas before they would embark on ships, going north via the Atlantic Ocean, the coast or whatever. Um, what was also interesting, well, I guess let me step back for a minute, because one of the things I always do every year, the fall semester of school for us. I have science. I teach the science and for two 9-week quarters. But in the spring, I transition to African American literature, and so I like to use historical fiction or biographies to teach my students about historical events. And so one of the books that I used was that we read this last year was The House of Dyerstre by Virginia Hamilton. And this book is about a family who moves to Ohio. The father is a college professor, and they move into the house of Dyerstre, who was a European American abolitionist. And they find out that the father may have already known, but there was a lot of history around this house, that it was part of the Underground Railroad, and that it was full of trap doors and secret passageways, th- that Africans can come in there, and, if somebody showed up in the middle of their meal, they would be able to escape through these passageways. So that was how the house was designed. And I had my students read this book. But in addition to reading this book, one of their projects with this book was to look at, do some research about the Underground Railroad here in North Carolina. So that's one of the reasons why I'm able to present this to you, because I had already done this project, or made my children do this project. So I learned a lot from their lessons. But they also had to take uh, shoe boxes, and they worked in teams, and each one had to create a floor, with all, and then all the different boxes would be attached, and it would show how they had to show how they would get from one floor to a next, a passageway out of the box, and what would, different rooms, and it was really cool because they came up with so many innovations of how to escape. And, they really thought it out. And so this age group is what, 10-year-olds, 9 and 10-year-olds. And so that was a really cool project. But yeah, they read this story. This book is about 200 something pages. Yeah, 230 something pages. And so this was the novel they read last year. But the previous year, I had them read Free Water, because we're also going to see, we also learned about the Great Dismal Swamp. And this book is about children who are escaping, and North Carolina. I think it's North Carolina, or it's either North Carolina or Virginia, and they stumble into the Dismal Swamp, and they get separated from their mother, and their mother is caught and taken back to the plantation. But in the meantime, people who live in the Dismal Swamp find them and then protect them. The author did a really good job of showing the disposition of a child who was enslaved versus the disposition of children who were freed, and how the children transitioned once they got into the space of freedom and understanding autonomy and over their lives, and able to make their own decisions and determine what they're going to learn and what they're going to do each and every day. And so the story ends with, oh, maybe I shouldn't tell you because you might want to read the book. But anyway, the same children who read The House of Dies last year read this one the year before. And so I just believe that, children need to have, it's a fun experience. You're learning about your history, but you're also learning about uh, learning about it through a child's lens. And so I really, this one, Amina Lukeman Dawson, and then the other one, Virginia Hamilton, is like a renowned author. She's, award winning. But so with that, one of the things that the children also learned was about the different types of codes. Um, in Dias Dreer, they the folks in the book, one of the examples was they had these quadrifoils, which are like little triangular shaped, 90-degree angled um, uh, objects. And so they were like 90 degrees, and they would be used to point in specific directions. The author also included references to sticks. People would tie sticks together, and they had different messages that for that only the Africans could interpret, who were the escapees. And so as I was going through this history, I was like, okay, um, the information, the research indicated that, or get expounded on that information. And I thought that was really cool. So some of the things that they learned were these at these different locations, particularly at the Elmwood Plantation. So the Elmwood Plantation is located in Little Washington. I had no idea. I've heard about Little Washington. I've got family who is from Little Washington, but I had no idea about the significance that this little city played in the Beaufort County. Apparently, the Elmwood Plantation, which housed, I think that it was a 200 and something acre farm, 280. So it wasn't the size of Stagville here in Durham, Oxford area, but it was still 230 something acres, and it only had 89 Africans, which is only 89. But anyway, the Stagville had about 900. I think. Yeah, 900 enslaved Africans. And so, but because of its location, it is said that on the water, that a lot of abolitionists and spies would infiltrate this plantation as blacksmiths, metal workers, midwives, and tannermen, and they would, or tanners, which I think are the people who did, leather and stuff like that. And they would get jobs on these plantations and offer their services to teach these skills to the Africans. And then, they were always welcomed because they were sharing these skill sets. And so, but while they were there, they would also solicit who ready to run. So I thought that was crazy. And so, so that area, the Elmwood Plantation, was constantly under siege by these abolitionists, just like Norfolk. They said quite a few of the people were able to uh, 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 in ingratiate themselves to the plantation owners and to the whatever uh, not patty rollers, but the overseers, and become completely immersed in the culture of that plantation, and then use that information. What were their schedules, what were their trade schedules, and in addition to that, just like in Norfolk and the Portsmouth area, they all the plantation owners also outsource their Africans to work on these on the wharfs, and the name of the wharf was Havenworth, I believe. Yeah, Haven's Wharf. And so there was a whole thing going on down at Haven's Wharf. Um, people there was a story about a young girl. Let me see if I can pull up her picture. I thought I mean, I was just fascinated. Um, oh wait, yeah, a young girl here named Calimbre, and the picture of her, it is a very old picture, but it's the little girl over here in this corner, and her name was Calimbre, Calimbre Harrison, and she was born in 1843, and she had this uncanny sense of recall. So anything she heard, she could remember it. And so whenever there someone was like, so she was like a human recorder, I guess. So anything she heard, she was able to recall it and pass that information on to conductors, to abolitionists, spies, whatever. And as part of her part, she played a significant role in making sure they got the information they needed, because she could hear and remember everything. So I was like, oh my God. So that was one thing. And then they have Little Washington actually has a historic site, and this is called the Underground. Uh, it's an Underground Railroad Museum, and it's located in this uh, caboose of a train. So if you go through there, you can go visit this caboose and learn about the history in Little Washington as well. And then, what was the other thing that they lived? Okay, so, they would have this way of signaling people on the coast, and so, on the seaboard. So, if there were, uh and they couldn't tell anybody, so, one of the reasons why it's hard to track, the Underground Railroad is because it was tightly sealed, nobody was telling anything. But this is one of the things that the museum curators have advised, that if you listen to the stories of your old folks, you would find that there some of the songs were directly related to codes, just like "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," and then "Wade in the Water." Those are examples of African spirituals that were also runaway codes. Um, um, then they also said this thing about sunflowers. So if you saw that, people were whatever they were, whatever the code was, it had to meld with whatever was going on the seaboard. So women would carry baskets with sunflowers. Now, the way you knew that they were not selling in the marketplace is that these people would never sing. They were just holding the basket. And so if you notice that they weren't singing, then you would look at the sunflowers. And the sunflowers, the center of it, is a dark, a dark circle. And so those symbolize eyes. And so the tilt of the flower in the basket, the flowers in the baskets would indicate direction, um, who is out there watching, and so I was like, wow. So people who these messages would be passed on to folks so of what to look out for, and that was one of the signals. Another one is if you saw a lot of black-eyed peas thrown on the boardwalk. People would just think that somebody had spilled a bag of black-eyed peas, but if you saw them, that would mean that there were a lot of people watching. Patty rollers were out and they were watching the seaboard. So be careful, stay hidden. Another sign was they had women who would wear these big, what do they call them? Petticoats. And they would wear three petticoats, and the colors were blue, green, and gold. So if they flashed a blue petticoat, then they were signaling to abolitionists or conductors, hey, we need to travel by water. If they were swinging around and showing the green petticoat, that meant they wanted to go by land. If they were flashing the gold petticoat, they wanted to go by stagecoach. And apparently, we're talking about a bustling seaport. So you had a lot of stagecoaches going through there, in addition to a lot of boats and traveling through there. So I was just fascinated. I'm like, what? He was so smart. And so that was some of the stuff that they were doing it, but the little Washington was like off the chain. And so now, I mean, people probably don't even realize when they've gone through there, but I have been through that area and had no idea about the significance of its role in the Underground Railroad. And so I think I've already told you about Miss Calimbra. Another area was the great. I mean, I already talked to y'all about the Great Dismal Swamp, and I told you. Hopefully, I reminded you that it was a 1 million acre uh, piece of land or swamp area between North Carolina and Virginia, and so it too, had a lot of. In that regard, people would hide in there. They just if they got in there or got away from the plantations, they would just stay. A lot of them stayed, and they did not come out. I think the Dismal Swamp wasn't abandoned until after at the end of the Civil War, so 1600s, late 1600s to 1865. But another area that I found out about was in Guilford County. Now, Guilford County is, the Greensboro area. So apparently Guilford College was a underground location as in this side, and that's not Piedmont, but it's a little further down the road from here. But there was a tree located on the outskirts of or behind um Guilford County's Guilford College. And there was a particular tree, it's called the tulip tree. And that particular tulip tree is 300 years old, and they said it stood kind of by itself, so that they believed that it was a possibility, or what they're not sure, but because the tree is a 300-year-old tree, they are certain that there were people who would probably use that tree as a particular meeting spot. And so you could take tours along that route, and the and along that tour, they show you where people were gathered. They said this is where you had Quakers, you had freed Africans who would provide supplies and direction for Africans who were escaping through that area. And so that one, um, uh, so that was another significant area. We also know that we had a large Quaker community here in like the Winston-Salem area, High Point, and that were very much involved in the abolitionist Underground Railroad movement. And so North Carolina has its own take or this own contribution to the Underground Railroad. And one of the things that I believe happens, and this is probably off topic a little bit, but I was listening to uh, uh, Neil deGrasse Tyson the other day, and he had an episode on there with a beautiful young lady who was a doctor of bio biological science or something, and she specializes in genetics, so biogenetics. And they were speaking about how, you know, people who have gone through trauma pass the that genetic makeup on to their children before they're born. They're transferred through the womb and through the sperm of men. And they've done quite a few studies on this, and of course they said it was still kind of controversial, but we know that a lot, that if the stress, starvation, um, uh, um, illnesses that were created by trauma, um, were passed right on to the kids. The kids exhibited those same illnesses, even though they had not experienced the trauma. What I wonder is the reverse of this idea. If African American children who are in submerged in a curriculum that elevates them, shares their historical narratives through a lens of empowerment. It's showing the intelligence and the creativity and the innovation and the determination and the perseverance and the overcoming and the joy of their ancestors, and the way they navigated these extremely difficult places, how some of them persevered and escaped, how some of them, like Harriet Jacobs, some of us know about her. She hid from her plantation owner, thought she had traveled somewhere else, and but she hid in a space, a small crawl space, and was in there for years before she finally, I mean, like years, like a decade almost or more. I can't remember, but it's amazing. And that she was able, she stayed there. She was hidden there. Nobody knew where she was. I think it was her mother or her grandmother, and they kept her hidden for that time. So when you see that determination, and I mean, wow, Black people are amazing. But when we are passing this understanding, just like we can pass trauma to our children, I believe we can also pass on to them this affirmation, because the Africans who came across the ocean had that when they came here. They developed this under the trauma of enslavement. They developed this other gene, but for them to even persevere and survive the um the Ma'afa, um, shows that, what were you made of to get through that? And a lot of them died. But the ones who survived, we're the descendants of the ones who survived that. And so that perseverance, so there must be that in us as well, this idea of we're going to persevere and we're going to make it. And so I believe that what we're doing when we teach African-centered education, we are reestablishing within this next generation that same sense of power, of affirmation, of determination. And they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, because these people, they're the descendants of people who fought wars, and we got our freedom. And so I give thanks for that. But this is why we have to teach this history. Don't ignore it. See your strength in it and your power in it. Ashe.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I walk into the sound of drums.
I'm a St. Cia student. Of course I know my mother. I'm a CCS student. Of course I can work with my hands.
I'm a St. Cia student.
If you're talking, they will hear you.
We all want our kids to grow up safe and healthy, so we show them how. And we tell them with honest conversations that let them know what we expect. Not just one time, but every chance we get. That's especially important when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. Kids not only need to know the dangers and how to avoid them, they need to hear it often from you. And when it comes to pain medications, opioids, they need to know that they should never be taken without a prescription and never shared with friends or family. It's dangerous and illegal. So talk with your kids and guide them through the challenges of growing up safe and healthy. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
So talk back here. You can do it if you try.